Engineers are responsible for some of the toughest and most necessary jobs around. Without them, our buildings would be falling down, our trains wouldn't run on time, and the answer to every problem would just involve a liberal amount of duct tape. Considering the difficulty of the job, mistakes and oversights occur from time to time. And when they do, they can be hilarious. With that, let's take time to look at some of the funniest engineering fails ever. Troubled tracks. What you're currently seeing is a train en route from Ohio to the town of Cecil on a routine cargo delivery. Only instead of traveling along solid, sturdy rails, the train precariously wobbles across tracks that look like they belong on a roller coaster, not a railroad. While it looks like a Photoshop trick, the melty tracks are a real, if unusual, phenomenon. Prolonged heat is known to make metal relax and expand, and then contract when things cool off. Usually this isn't a problem for railways, as tracks undergo a process called stressing. This increases the temperature range most tracks can maintain their shape at, and guarantees they return to their original shape if they do expand. Hastily assembled tracks that forego the stressing process, however, run the risk of the spaghettification we see here. This is when important ballasts become damaged or dislodged as the tracks expand, and when they contract, they don't revert back to their original shape. These tracks in New Zealand likely only had a small weak point along the railing, but that was enough for them to become completely spaghettified when the region was struck by a 7.1 earthquake. So, despite looking tough, imperfect railroad tracks can be sensitive. And while many areas of the world don't have to worry about earthquakes, we all need to worry about rising temperatures as summers get hotter and hotter across the globe, potentially spaghettifying more and more train tracks. So, I hope we all love roller coasters. Disney Death Ray. Quick question. Where is the happiest place on Earth? The arms of a loved one? No, you can't buy merchandise in the arms of a loved one. It's Disney World, of course. The only place where adult men are encouraged to interact with kids in weird, identity-hiding costumes. Ah, happiness. Well, in 2003, Disney decided to add a little more prestige to their name by commissioning famed architect Frank Gehry to design a classy new concert hall for them, to be located right in the middle of downtown Los Angeles. This was his final proposal. Sleek, futuristic, and kinda trippy. Obviously, the unconventional design split people's opinions. Though it's clearly an impressive piece of architecture, it's also a bit of an eyesore in more ways than one. You see, this metal abomination was comprised of over 12,500 curvy stainless steel panels. And this meant that, while you could safely appreciate the concert hall's unique design at night, during the daytime, it became blindingly bright. The steel panels covering the building were extremely reflective, to the extent where people said looking at the building in the day was like staring directly at the sun. To make matters worse, the hall is right next to a major road, and its unavoidable glare was responsible for temporarily blinding multiple drivers. But wait, there's more. You see, the concert hall didn't just reflect light, it also magnified heat. According to some bystanders, the sidewalk around the metal monstrosity could get as hot as 140 degrees, enough to leave some serious burns if you weren't careful. Realizing they had basically installed a permanent lawsuit machine, Disney acted fast. They had each and every one of those 12,500 panels sanded down, making them significantly less shiny. While this means the building isn't quite as grossly incandescent as Gary envisioned it, it's a heck of a lot safer. Good thing, too, because after Disney bought the rights to the Star Wars franchise in 2012, that super scorching light beam would have made it look like the concert hall was Disney's homage to the Death Star. I wonder if they thought about aiming it at Universal Studios. Tread carefully. Have you ever come home to find a loved one fast asleep and begun creeping around the house like a spy so as not to wake them up? I have a few times, but thanks to my 2 left feet, it usually ends up with me waking up Mrs. Amazed. Still, I can breathe a sigh of relief knowing my loud footsteps have never caused as much damage as this guy's. Dang, Daniel Johnson and his brother from Pawling, New York were out exploring some scenic winter wilderness when this old house caught their eye. Unfortunately, it seems the house's foundations weren't quite up to carrying the weight of all that snow, so a little jump was all it needed to jolt the structure and make it come tumbling down. Good thing he wasn't inside, or he'd have learned how hard it was to carry all that snow too. You know what's not hard though? Hitting those like and subscribe buttons down below. They're so well designed, unlike this next funny failure. The house that Grove built. Our next story takes us back to 2006 and onto the Something Awful forums. If you've been on the internet a while, you're already holding your breath because this website is responsible for some classic internet drama. Our tale begins when a moderator for the forums by the name of Grover decided he was going to build his own home, based on an MS Paint mock-up, and despite being completely unqualified. A perfect storm. Users let him know this was a terrible idea, but Grover didn't listen and soon found himself the architect of the single most memed building on the planet, Grover House. Grover House really was the home that kept on giving, with each image Grover posted telling a different hilarious story. Grover's, unique eye for aesthetics are on display here, where you can see 7 windows in 4 different styles, none of which mesh together in a coherent way. And if you think they make more sense from the inside, they don't. Then there's this picture of his kitchen, which reveals that Grover thought he would need 8 power outlets a foot apart from one another. Personally though, I'm a fan of this picture of the interior, which reveals a window perfectly placed so that if you fell down the stairs, you'd also crash through the window into a swamp below. Oh, did I not mention this entire house was built in a place called the Great Dismal Swamp? No, that's not an area in a Dark Souls game. It's a real swamp in Virginia that Grover thought would be the perfect place to build a home. Now, the funny thing about houses, though, is that they need to pass several safety inspections to be deemed livable. Well, as you can imagine, Grover House did not pass the safety inspection. This was perhaps due to his septic tank not being enough to support the waste his family would produce, or the fact that he used drywall, a notoriously flimsy substance, as a load-bearing material. So Grover was finally forced to admit enough was enough and pack the whole thing in. Yeah, right. Instead, Grover decided to become a qualified health and safety inspector just so he had the authority to pass his clearly unsafe house. The ultimate fate of Grover House is still a mystery, with some claiming it was abandoned while others insist that Grover still lives there today, roaming the monstrosity like a mad scientist. Come on, Hollywood, where's our Grover House horror movie? Thirst trap. If you've ever been house hunting, you're already aware that waterfront properties tend to be crazy expensive. But how close is too close? How about this house?
Oh my gosh.
Dang. and I thought my belly flop was impressive. This house was on the bank of a river running through Yellowstone, Wyoming, when it plummeted into the drink and was swept away by a mighty current. Luckily, no one was injured, as everyone had safely evacuated the house long before it crumbled into the river. Though it's a crazy sight, this kind of thing happens all the time when houses are built along cut banks, which is to say banks that have sudden drop-offs into bodies of water. Because cut banks are exposed to the elements, they're particularly vulnerable to erosion. This means that with enough heavy weather, it's only a matter of time before your waterfront property becomes a waterlogged property. Either that or this house was just real thirsty. Tiring work. Pro tip: always make sure you have a spare tire on hand. After all, you never know when you might get a flat or need to embed it permanently into a construction site. Yeah, it always pays to be prepared, I guess. So how did this tire end up here? Well, it may look like these builders were on autopilot and accidentally entombed a nice tire into their wall, but it's there intentionally. You see, the tire actually provides the perfect curved shape and foundation for creating a beautifully symmetrical arch, after which the tire can be removed. These folks may be constructing a simple archway, but it's so low to the ground, it could also be a mazar, which is a mausoleum or burial site consisting of a series of arches. This technique isn't strictly limited to austere tombs, though. Here we can see some civil engineering students in Ethiopia tasked with constructing a small arched bridge out of local waste. As it turns out, a leftover tire proved to be a great foundation. Talk about arch deco. Troubled bridge over waters. Ah, Venice, a city of history, culture, canals, and cranial injuries. Surprised by that last one. Yeah, they tend to leave it out of the travel brochure. The city's impressive Grand Canal is over 2 miles long and 225 feet at its widest point. Despite this, however, in the mid-2000s, there were only 3 bridges crossing it, which could get pretty crowded. So, in 2008, the city commissioned famed architect Santiago Calatrava to design its 4th Grand Canal Bridge. Calatrava was previously responsible for such eye-catching architecture as Sweden's Turning Torso Tower and Spain's Auditorio de Tenerife. So, Venetians were expecting something breathtaking for their upcoming bridge. But this was the result of Santiago's hard work, the Ponte de la Constituzione, or Constitution Bridge. Stark, simple, and bold. Citizens were pleased with the bridge's elegant, curved design and striking translucency, but there was something these Venetians were blind to. You see, to get that see-through look just right, Santiago had primarily constructed the bridge out of glass. And why is this a problem? Well, Venice experiences around 32 inches of rain a year, distributed pretty evenly across the months. And glass is a notoriously slippery material when wet. This made Constitution Bridge fairly treacherous to cross all year round. But in winter, it was a death trap. In addition to receiving a lot of fog in the winter, the rain that fell onto the cold glass bridge would quickly freeze, making it even more slippery. The bridge soon became infamous among locals and tourists alike, as pedestrians suffered constant slips and accidents attempting to cross it. What's more, there was no ramp, which meant if you were in a wheelchair, you had to pray the person helping you up those stairs had steady footing. Now, we can all laugh and point at Santiago for this blunder, but how could he have seen this coming? Well, maybe because he'd made this exact mistake before, creating Bilbao's notoriously slippery Zubi-Zuri Bridge, also made out of glass. In the end, the city of Venice had no choice but to cover the Constitution Bridge in a series of ugly stone panels, ruining its aesthetic but improving its usability. Well, that's one slip-up Santiago won't make again. Don't quote me on that. Stairs to hospital. Stairs are an essential, if fairly simple, invention that were an essential step in the advancement of humankind. There are even steps found at Göbekli Tepe, one of the world's oldest settlements dating back 12,500 years. Now, with that in mind, how is it possible that we can still get stairs this wrong today? We have over 12,000 years of experience with this, guys. Come on. Well, the reason awful zigzagging stairs like this exist is frequently down to poor planning. If a series of steps are too large for the stairway they're meant to occupy, often the only way they can be made to fit without sacrificing their height is by placing them diagonally. At least that's what happened with these meme-worthy stairs designed by Gabriela Gustafsson in 2006. According to Gabriela, these panic attack-inducing stairs are both functional and exciting to walk down due to the extra steepness. Okay, so accidents happen, and sometimes you have to make the best out of a bad situation. It's unfortunate, but understandable. But then there's stairs like these, which just have to be intentional, right? Any builder with a pair of eyes could see there's something very wrong here, which leads me to think this is a case of malicious compliance. Malicious compliance is the act of following orders as given but intentionally ignoring any problems or mistakes with those orders. In this case, maybe the contractors got stiffed on the pay and decided to teach their client a lesson. Oh, you don't like these, boss? Well, we followed the blueprints you gave us exactly, so what's the problem? The edge of your seat. Now, we've all lived through the indignity of excitedly sitting down at a sports ball event, only to realize you're seated behind a giant that completely obstructs your view. It happens, but it's something the stadium can't really control. What they can control, however, are seats like this in Fenway Park Stadium, where the fans' view is completely obscured by a pillar. Yeah. Suddenly being sat behind Lurch doesn't seem like such a problem, does it? Well, how about this one in Yankee Stadium, where half of your field view is obscured by a raised platform? Talk about a class divide. Finally, there are these seats, and I don't know what to say here. Maybe these seats were okay for a family of giraffes out at a ball game, but other than that, how do you explain them even existing? Well, many sports fans theorize that seats like these exist solely so stadiums can advertise a higher seating capacity than they actually have. No one is supposed to end up in these seats, but sometimes computers make mistakes and people are placed there anyway. Well, that does it. From now on, I'm not going to a sports game without my trusty periscope. Sprung a leak. Pipes and electrical wires in a house are a lot like our own bones and arteries. And, just like us, they can break down if you don't look after them. Case in point, take a peek at this electrical socket that appears to have, sprung a leak? Wait, what? How did that happen? Well, as crazy as it looks, it's actually a more common issue than you might think. You see, houses tend to be filled with pressurized pipes, which help water get from one area of your home to another. Sometimes, if these pipes are improperly installed or just worn down, they can crack. This leads to water leaking and pooling up inside your walls. And if you have a loose power outlet, creating an indoor waterfall. If this happens to you, turn off the main water valve in the building and call a plumber as soon as possible. And no matter how bored you get, don't plug in your phone. Slow burn. Molasses is a thick, sticky, dark brown substance known for its sweetness and extremely slow pouring speed. Yeah, if you've ever heard the phrase slow as molasses, this is why. In addition to being sickly sweet, however, did you know that molasses can also be deadly? In the 1910s, molasses was experiencing a boom in popularity as a cheap alternative to sugar. Now, during this time, the Purity Distilling Company opened up a molasses processing plant in Boston, Massachusetts, and their safety precautions were a little lacking, to say the least. As the company expanded, they quickly built a new distillery, whose construction was overseen by a man named Arthur P. Gell. But Gell was a financial advisor and had no experience in engineering. But he was cheaper than a trained engineer. As you can probably tell, it didn't take long for one of the main tanks at the facility to spring a leak, which was hastily patched up. However, as more and more cracks began to form, the company had the bright idea, why not just paint the tank a dark color? No, really, they figured if no one could tell the tank was leaking, then there was no real problem. Ingenious, right? Well, no. On January 15th, 1919, the 50-foot-tall tank finally gave out, letting loose a landslide of over 2 million gallons of molasses. The wave was apparently 55 feet tall and traveled as fast as 35 miles per hour. As the tank was only 200 feet from the harbor, it caused huge damage to the city and ended up injuring 150 people. If you're wondering how something as harmless as molasses could be this damaging, well, consider the fact it's 40% denser than water, meaning it's way harder to swim or wade through. Honestly, the city was practically buried alive. Over 300 people volunteered to clean up the spill, but it still took weeks to clear the molasses. The company lied and tried to blame the disaster on anarchists, but a court eventually ordered them to pay $300,000 in damages, about $5.1 million in today's money. Regardless of how sweet the molasses is, I bet that left a sour taste in their mouths. Edgy parking. Imagine this. You're an independent bus driver and have just purchased a brand spankin' new vehicle. You're excited to start your career when, upon driving home, you realize you've made a huge mistake. Your garage can't fit your bus. What do? Apply for a larger parking permit? Try to extend your garage? Move somewhere roomier? Nah. How about you just knock a wall down and let your bus's caboose hang free in the air? This picture was taken in Cicade Trabalhara district of Olinda in Brazil. According to commenters on the forum this image was posted to, this is actually a school bus that belongs to an independent driver. His garage clearly couldn't fit his vehicle, so he had a wall taken out. I see. Big brain thinking there, but this makes me uncomfortable for so many reasons. Like, is the structure of the building on top okay? If he reverses in a little too far, what happens next? And perhaps most importantly, why on earth did he think this was a good idea in the first place? The lunacy on display here is making me question whether the image is just a clever Photoshop. After all, the way the shadows are falling on the bus does look slightly doctored. But either way, we've all probably still experienced worse buses than this. Foam run. There's nothing quite like opening your window on a cool winter morning and being greeted by a fresh, crisp blanket of snow. Wait, hold on a sec. Enhance. Well, that's not snow at all. It's foam. No. That's right. What you're looking at is wobbly, frothy foam, and it was everywhere in Santa Clara, California on November 18th, 2016. For a few hours, there was mass speculation as to the cause. The usual internet weirdos were claiming it was sentient, or the work of the Illuminati. The actual culprit, however, was poor design. Tracing back the foam revealed its origin was a hangar occupied by Signature Flight Service, who repair and run maintenance on jet engines. As you might expect, jet engines are dangerous things to work on. If something goes wrong and one explodes, a fire sustained by jet fuel can spread incredibly quickly. This is why the company uses an alarm system that dispenses foam, like this one, when it detects an accident. The foam is designed to spread out across a large surface area as quickly and thickly as possible, smothering the fire before it grows too large. But it's also soap-based, so it doesn't damage the aircraft. Evidently, however, Signature Flight's alarm system left a lot to be desired, as it either detected a fire when there definitely was none, or it just malfunctioned and decided it was time for a foam party. Moreover, once the alarm goes off, there's no way to kill the foam, so it just kept going and going. This could be seen as a good thing. After all, you don't want someone accidentally turning the foam off during a fire. But it also leads to situations like this. While the police were called to respond to the bubble and strife, there wasn't much they could do besides wait for it to dissipate. And while the foam can be somewhat toxic in large doses, no one was exposed to it long enough to cause any harm, including that biker. It's a shame it only lasted a day. I can't be the only one who'd think it would be super fun to play a game of paintball in there, ducking in and out of the foam. Call me 007 from Russia with sponge. Location, location, location. Lots of factors go into determining where ATMs are installed. For example, if you're a greedy bloodsucker and you want to charge a high transaction fee, it doesn't make sense to put your ATM down outside a store that offers free cash withdrawals. Now, with that in mind, try to conceive of a reason this ATM was placed where it was. Maybe this guy in the picture is an outlier, and the average height in the area is 10'5". Either that or a nefarious jokester stole the steps leading up to this ATM and placed them somewhere else. That would explain what these pointless steps are doing here. Useless stairs like these are what's known as HyperArt Thomasons, which is an absolutely awesome name for a piece of civil engineering that is functionally useless. HyperArt Thomasons are typically born when only certain areas of buildings are constructed or demolished, leaving useless relics behind. Well, it's either that or the deadliest, most compact slide I've ever seen. Well, they might not have been pretty, but they were a hilarious collection of engineering oversights and failures. Which did you think was the funniest? Let me know down in the comments below, and until next time, thanks for watching.